On Facebook. Pacific Heartbeat, brought to you by the Heart Foundation.
All new Pacific Mornings with Will on 531 PI.
It is 11 minutes past 8 o'clock. This is Pacific Mornings on 531 PI. Now, before we get into the geopolitical tensions that are rife in the Pacific at the moment, I want to turn our attention to the Green Party petitioning the government to grant visa-free travel to visitors from Pacific Island nations. Now, spokesperson Tiano Tuiono, who is spearheading the petition, argues that as part of the Pacific family, New Zealand should remove unfair entry barriers. I couldn't agree more, but joining me for reaction to this, plus we'll talk about what's going on in the Cook Islands and Samoa, as well as Canterbury University Professor Stephen Ratuva back on the show with us. A very good morning to you. How have you been, sir?
Oh, good morning, Yanravunaka. It's fine down here in Christchurch.
Lovely, lovely indeed. Hey, look, what do you make of this petition from not only the Green Party? I also want to point to former National MP Anai Arthur is also pursuing a petition, ultimately calling for the same action. Do you think it has legs?
Yes, I think it's a great idea. I think it's long overdue. The Pacific has been connected with the Pacific, so with New Zealand, um, you know, for a long time. In fact, New Zealand is part of the Pacific. It's part of the Pacific regional organizations. Its identity is in the Pacific. The Maoris, were the indigenous people here, culturally connected with the Pacific, and also for New Zealand citizens, you can just walk in and out of the Pacific without having to get any visa. So I think it's only fair that you have a reciprocal exchange there. If you look at the list of 60 or so countries which have free visa access to New Zealand, none of them is from the Pacific, none of them is from Africa, mostly from the Middle East, from Europe, the Americas, and Asia. You have countries like Seychelles, for instance, in the Indian Ocean, and Iceland in the North Atlantic. So, I mean, I don't think New Zealand has actually come out to justify why no country in the Pacific is listed on that list. So I think it's important for New Zealand to come out to be transparent
Certainly.
in terms of telling us why exactly aren't the Pacific countries part of that list.
It kind of begs the question, though, is there political appetite, do you think, for such visa-free travel for Pacific people, at least in this current iteration of, say, government or parliament? Is there actually appetite?
I'm not sure about this particular government, but certainly over the years there have been discussions around it. There have been particular countries in the region have bilaterally approached New Zealand and Australia in relation to that. And I think the momentum should build up. And whether it happens in the current government or the next one, that's still to be seen. And I think it's important for broad solidarity amongst the Pacific countries in this particular issue, especially now, of course, with lots and lots of Pacific people being used as unskilled laborers coming to New Zealand to work in the as seasonal workers. And so there's a lot of that synergy taking place at the economic level and also politically between the Pacific Island countries and New Zealand. So that, like in Europe, for instance, they have citizen visa across the continent. And although the model of regionalism in the Pacific is slightly different, but I think in the context and in the spirit of regionalism, New Zealand should allow for that free access as well.
Certainly. Hey, look, let's turn our attention now to the Pacific. It is quite an interesting time talking about Pacific politics. I mean, a few weeks ago, I'm sure the dust has settled now, although some would argue it's still there, in terms of the unsettled nature of the Cook Islands' relationship with New Zealand following Mark Brown signing the deal with China. Do you think, in retrospect, there was too much of a cacophony of media noise surrounding the coverage of the Cook Islands deal with China?
Yeah, I suppose at the end of the day, it's a matter which has to be settled between New Zealand and Cook Islands. They have a long-standing relationship, and I think New Zealand also has to open its mind in terms of how it deals with its territories in the Pacific and other Pacific Island countries as well. Particularly at the time when they're trying to exert more autonomy in terms of their foreign policy. And I think it's the people of the Cook Islands and should determine their future in terms of whether they want total autonomy or maintain this particular relationship. And the idea of consultation, which is in the Constitution, but not in the 2001 agreement between New Zealand and the Cook Islands, has to be revisited as to the what exactly does it mean, the consultation, what form does it take, and how does it play out in the context of the dynamics of what's happening around the Pacific, particularly with the big powers like China coming in, and how small states such as the Cook Island are able to what extent are they free to be able to exercise their sovereignty in engagement with other countries, and to what extent does New Zealand still hold the strings in terms of what to be done and what not to be done.
Indeed. And look, let's turn now. Look, we're jumping from island to island here, but to Samoa now, where Whiame Naomi Mataafa has survived a second vote of no confidence in as many weeks. I mean, jeepers, it seems almost volatile over there. 1 minute you don't know which is which in terms of, the governing of that country. What do you make of the situation in Samoa?
Yeah, it's happening simultaneously with other developments around the Pacific, and each country has its own unique historical and political, cultural circumstances. Certainly in the case of Samoa, it's interesting how this playing out since the last election, since Tulepa tried to continue as much as he could, but then it failed to eventuate. And now with a small minority, Mataafa managed to survive, and also the challenges to her government from within the party itself. She's able to survive the two votes of no confidence means that there's some resilience and there's some continuity there, but it's something which is normal in all countries, I suppose, in the world. In the Pacific itself, Tonga has gone through votes of no confidence. Vanuatu, it's quite common. Solomon Islands is quite common. In Papua New Guinea is quite common. So it's part of the process of democracy, the use of vote of no confidence. If various other means do not work, and usually politicians, they use it as a means of trying to achieve whatever political act they have in mind.
Sure. And also in Fiji, back home, I also want to talk about Rabuka's move to amend the Fiji constitution. I mean, perhaps I'm putting it too simply here, but he won just about enough support to push through the bill. What do you make of that, and give us a bit of context to it as well?
Yeah, Fiji is now going through what they call political overload. There are layers and layers of issues taking place simultaneously. While they're trying to amend the constitution, there's also being a lot of fluidity in the political party space, where the Fiji first broke up and then 9 members joined Rabuka's government. And then the judiciary has been in a bit of tense and fluid situation as well. And they're also trying to go through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to look at the impact of the coups over the years. And then now they want to change the constitution as well. So all these things are putting a lot of pressure and stress on the government, on the people, on the country. And so there's not much thinking in terms of how to unpack things one after the other. Everything is happening all at once. So the attempt to change the constitution is multi-layered as well. The constitution is seen as belonging to the Fiji First government. So when the new government came into power, that is one of the first things they did was to talk about constitution change in the beginning, and now they're trying to do it. And there's so many things in the constitution which need to be changed as well. But the process of doing it, that's the controversial bit, the legal process. To change the amendment clause, which means that they have to use that clause itself, which is not easy. It has to go through Parliament, and then has to go through a referendum as well. 3/4 of the voters. That's not an easy task. Being able to change the constitution has two dimensions. If it's very, very easy to change the constitution, any constitution for that matter, then it's going to be very fluid and unstable. If it's very difficult to change the constitution, then it's going to be unstable as well, because people will start thinking of the extra legal means of doing it. In the case of Fiji, they immediately think of coups because
Yes.
they've had coups in the past. So it's very sensible to have a constitutional amendment process which is somewhere in the middle to maintain that sense of stability.
Yes, certainly. Hey, look, and just your general consensus or your vibe in terms of what you are seeing playing out at the moment, geopolitically speaking. Obviously, the Trump administration, since he's come in, boy, it has already been quite an administration, and he's barely had his feet under the table. In the sense of that, I mean, how do you think that plays for the Pacific with China's influence in the region? And, well, we haven't really seen much talk from Trump in terms of its eyes on the Pacific, although I do note that Winston Peters is due to meet with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, this week. What do you make here of geopolitical tensions at the moment?
Oh, well, yeah, the impact of what's happening in the United States is already happening in the Pacific. China can sense the void, the geopolitical void, with Trump trying to retreat from globalism, from strategic engagement with the rest of the world, certainly with the Pacific. And one of the reasons why it came out doing its saber rattling exercises, live exercises between Australia and New Zealand, almost like telling Australia, look, come and get me. Your elder brother or elder sister is not here. So what can you do? So China is taking advantage of the void to strengthen its position militarily, strategically in the region. It's done the same thing to countries in Southeast Asia, particularly Taiwan. Taiwan had relied a lot on the United States. And also you're going to see a lot of Pacific people being deported from America as a result of the new immigration approach by the Trump administration, and also the withdrawal of the U.S. aid. Means
Yes.
that a lot of the communities in the Pacific are going to be deprived of support in terms of areas of climate change, in aspects of the well-being, in health, and so forth. So, and also, Trump doesn't know anything about the Pacific. He'll probably try to rename the Pacific the Ocean of America at some point. And then it's very transactional. He's looking at some economic benefits for himself. So he's using foreign policy as a means of extracting something for America. You see that in the case of Ukraine, for instance, or Gaza, to build hotels there and to have access to minerals in Ukraine and so forth. So in the case of the Pacific, what the Pacific offers is probably in the minds of some American investors is deep sea mining, and which is what is being sought after now, the rare metals for chips and for electrification for space and other things. So we might see Trump's attention in that direction, and that will, I believe, will change the geopolitical dynamics in a significant way as well. So already, as a result of the U.S. withdrawal, you see a lot of changes taking place in relation to the geopolitical dynamics, with China coming in a big way and redefining its position in the region, and also the United States going to forget about the region, the countries in the region. You may remember in 2022, the countries in the region, the leaders in the region were invited by Biden to Washington to sign the U.S. Pacific Agreement, Partnership Agreement, and they were promised $800 million. The money didn't come, and will never come anyway. So they've been kind of almost like tricked by the U.S. Um,
Yes.
just basically as a means of keeping the Chinese away. But of course, now the US is virtually withdrawn militarily and strategically from the region. So uh, now the question now is, how do we deal with the Chinese now that they are here and they're going to expand as we've seen in the Cook Islands, their interests and their influence in the region, and how Pacific Island countries need to maintain a sense of resilience and power and strength to be able to deal with China in a strategic manner.
Indeed. Gosh, I could spend hours talking about this. Thank you very much for your time this morning, for your expertise. Oh, actually, just a quick one for you, just a cheeky one before we wrap it up, I suppose. Rabuka also said he will reveal the names of those behind both coups, which he, ironically, himself orchestrated when he was in the military. What do you make of that?
Well, first, he's probably going to reveal his name. Everybody knows that. I mean, Fiji is very small. There were rumors being around. And in fact, there's no such thing as a secret in the Pacific, as you know. The coconut walrus, the Tanoa discussions, names do prop up. I'm not really sure how many more secret names are left. Some may have died, you know, since the 1987 coup that he staged. So I'm not really sure how many names are left to be revealed, because it appears that most of the names have been revealed, and people know about it. Some publicly, some privately. People talk about some of those behind the scene around the Tano Bowl, not so much written in academic papers or in the media. So, but it's interesting to see whether he's coming up with something new and any new names.
Indeed. Hey, thank you very much for that. That is Stephen Ratuva, Canterbury University professor. You have a good rest of your day, and it's great to have you back on the show.
Well, thanks so much.